What is going on, fellas and lady fellas? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I'm doing a little, analysis, I guess you would say, looking at all three VRAINS packs to date and pretty much analyzing which one I think is the best and also just noticing some patterns we've seen as they've developed 1, 2, and 3 in a row. And overall, I'm going to tell you an interesting, possibly debatable opinion of mine that VRAINS Pack-3 is the best VRAINS pack we have gotten. Let's just get started. Yeah, honestly, I've got a lot to get into, and I just want to make sure we go through everything. Now, keep in mind, this is just an opinion, and no matter what, I think I'm going to stand firm on this opinion that VRAINS Pack-3 is the best VRAINS pack overall. Now, obviously, there are opinions to this in terms of, but the archetype I love, or my 3 or 5 favorite archetypes weren't in VRAINS Pack-3. Okay, that's fair. That's opinion based. But I think overall, what VRAINS 3 is, what VRAINS Pack-3 is what all 3 VRAINS packs were meant to be in the first place. And let's talk a little bit more about that. So starting with VRAINS Pack-1, starting with all 3 of them, the first thing I want to look at is their variance in power, because that's a big thing for a lot of people. Because there are multiple insanely powerful VRAINS pack monsters from Link 1 as well as Link 2, but not necessarily as many powerful ones in Link 3. I think you can argue that maybe there's 2 that are really powerful. I think you can argue that maybe, let me skip here to VRAINS Pack-3. Maybe you could argue that Union Carrier has some implications that being generic can possibly just get Dragon Buster out of your deck. The Buster Blader monster to just lock your opponent out of the extra deck, but it's not a strong lock. It's fairly easy to out. If your opponent opens any specific cards in there, but there's some generic implications there, so that's a very strong card. I believe we'll see some play, as well as what's the other one I was looking at? I missed that one. Where did I put it? Wait, do I have an extra monster in here? Oh god, I'm going crazy. But the other one I'm missing is Predaplant Verte Anaconda. That's the other really important one here that I think I'm missing. What did I put here instead? Obviously but I thought the Bujin one was still put on the... I'm so confused right now. All right, whatever. We'll take care of that in a little bit. But as for now, let's talk about this. The Anaconda one, the one that can get Super Poly right out of the decks. There is the other really powerful one I think generically you look at and you say could be a problem. But the rest of these, none of these you're like, that's a problem. That card's going to be a problem. None of those are like that. But then when you look at VRAINS Pack 1 and 2, you look at cards like, obviously, Crystron Needle Fiber. There's a reason we still don't have Crystron Needle Fiber, and we're almost done importing all of VRAINS Pack 2 already. And this came out in VRAINS Pack 1. Heavy Metal Foe's Electromite has been banned and then brought back, and it's just insanely good. What's up? Next up, I Sold. That's the other really powerful one. One that maybe Konami thought nobody would be willing to put that many equip spells in their deck because it would cause too many bricks. But because of how powerful the effect is, it was worth it. And there are equip spells you can play that don't even matter if you draw them, right? Because you can get them back in the deck fairly easily. So there were just so many, there were just 3 like that. I could argue that those 3 are the 3 most powerful Link monsters in all 3 of them combined, which means the variance of VRAINS Pack 1 was so much larger than VRAINS Pack 2 and 3. And to kind of continue on that, not only do they have the 3 most powerful, you could argue that's 3 of the worst VRAINS pack monsters are all in VRAINS Pack 1. You could argue Dragaces, which is almost arguably unplayable, with how good the new support is for Gladiator Bees. Dragaces is almost unplayable in the deck. When would you ever actually want to make Dragaces, right? There's stuff like that. Pycofelina is okay. Master King Archfiend is god-awful. I've never seen any deck play Master King Archfiend, let alone Archfiends, just people that want to play Archfiends for fun. Never seen that. Madolche Fresh Sistart was super mediocre. Abyssalacia. What's the other one? I feel like I'm missing one big one. Oh, Shadal Construct. That's the big one. That's probably the worst one, maybe out of the entire series. 3 god-awful ones to pair with 3 amazing ones. And as well as Cherubini, Aromaseraphine Jasmine, and you could argue like Curious and like Gemnite Phantom Core. Those are like maybe not quite as strong as Electrum, Needle Fiber, and Isold, but they're right there. They're right nipping at the heels, right? So the variance is huge, and same thing with Link VRAINS Pack 2. You look at some of these monsters like the Thunder Stormek Link monster. Where's that guy? Because he's awful. Here he is. He's terrible. Dread Decimator, it's a terrible card. The only reason it's relevant in Heroes is because the hero cards lock them into Heroes, and he opens up 3 zones down below. So if you have enough extenders, you can just summon 3 fusions below him. That's really all he does. He's just a beater that opens up 3 zones and doesn't like conflict with like restrictions that certain hero cards have. That's all he is. He's not a good card. It's just specific to the archetype. He just like happens to work. I think the Parshath monster is pretty awful. Overall, and everything else is like pretty good, but that's the whole point, is that like awful. Whereas like you have like the BLS Link, that's a really powerful generic Link monster. Dragoonity is very strong in like Dragon decks. We already see Rusty Bardiche has been banned. Like that card's insane at how much it pluses you and how generic it is to make. But then again, the really low ceiling cards. You could argue the Harpy monster is not very good, right? And then we get the Link VRAINS Pack 3. And this is the big point I want to make, is there's not that much variance. They're all pretty good. Every card in here is pretty good. I don't think you would look at a single one of these cards and say, that card's garbage. That card's terrible. I think there's an argument maybe that the Mayakashi one is not that great because its effects are a little bit specific. But it's a generic zombie Link 4. It opens up 2 zones. It has the pot with, combined with a card like Necroworld Banshee in your grave. You can straight up, it is a negate on your opponent's turn, which is interesting, as well as like on your turn, if you can just activate 2 zombie effects in grave, you're just going to make 2 different monsters 0 attack and negate their effects to the end of the turn, just making it super easy to run through things. Obviously, zombies don't like make this that crazy easy. They don't spam the board like crazy. They can do it in combine with other decks, but not pure versions. So you could argue just because this is a Link 4 it doesn't work, but I'm not trying to get too deep into that. But you could argue that's the worst Link monster in this whole product, this whole set. And I would argue that this is better than Thunderstormek, Harpy Conductor, the Parshath Link, Dread Decimator, Construct, Master King Archfiend, and Dragaces. That like the worst Link monster, the absolute worst Link monster in all of Link VRAINS Pack 3 is better than the 3 worst of both of the other sets. So the variance is so much more compact here. And nothing is as high ceiling as I would say like the BLS Link in terms of genericism and also just like power, right? Like Needle Fiber, Electromite, and Isold. Nothing's quite that powerful in this set, but you could argue that like Union Carrier and like the Predaplant Link get kind of close there, but they're not quite there, right? They're not really that like as good as that. So I think that's where like things get a little muddled there. And Link VRAINS Pack 1 and 2 kind of look similar in that fashion, but Link VRAINS Pack 3 is just everything's good. Every single card you read is like, this is pretty good for that archetype. They're all playable in their own decks and in other possible decks. There's even for the 5 Link Dragon, the Link 5 Dragon, like just generic decks that Link spam. That could just be a win condition for them, right? I just think it's targeted genericism as well, because you argue some of these cards are generic to make, like any 2 fairies, any 2 monsters with different names, any 3 monsters as long as one's a winged beast, 2 zombies generic to zombies, like any 2 monsters, any 2 monsters with the same type or attribute. Like you see what I'm saying here. They're all fairly generic to make, but their effects are specific to what they do, that it forces you to, like, you're not playing them in other decks. A lot of them you're not playing in like other decks really, because their effects are so specific to their archetype. They're just easier to make, which actually adds even more support to the deck in the form that like you could just play like in like Buster Blader, you can just play the Striker engine, because Engage is essentially just getting into this card without your normal summons. If you open Engage with the normal summon in the deck that lets you search, I can't remember its name. I think it's, oh man, I can't even remember which one it is. But whatever. Without your normal summon, you get to make this card and then get to send, or at least bait a hand trap and then pop off with another maybe starter in your hand, right, as your normal summon. So like there's just stuff like that. It allows for other cards to be better in the deck than they were before, which is like an indirect way to support the deck. And I don't know, just stuff like that. And I think one of the knocks on Link VRAINS Pack 3 so far is that there are decks here that like didn't need links. There's multiple archetypes here. They were just like, they don't need links. Some of these, looking at Endymion. Because Electromite's already so good, they didn't need their own. They're already a tier 1, arguably tier 1 deck as is. Heroes already have, what, 3 Link monsters? So, like, why did they need another one? Evil Heroes specifically didn't have a Link monsters, and this is more tailored to Evil Heroes, but I understand the go at there. Same thing with World Chalice / World Legacy, whatever you want to call them. Same thing with, like, you could argue that ABCs don't have their own Link monster, but there's multiple generic Machine Link 2s that, like, they can take advantage of. Sky Strikers, they have straight up 4 Link monsters already. What people were like, why do they need another one? And I think they're kind of mad about it because it's already been a good deck for so long. But still, I think it helps the archetype, and a deck that's, like, on its way out in terms of, like, being phased. Like, Tennies already have multiple Link monsters. Like, why do Heralds need a Link monster? They already just, like, they either set up Herald or lose. So why are you ever actually going into this? Artifacts is a weird archetype. Like, people just argue that that's the one knock. And I think that's a fair knock. And I think I kind of do agree, because I think there are some archetypes that probably should have gotten a Link monster that didn't. Satellar Knights being a huge one there. If Bujins don't end up being in here, that would be one that's really big as well. And yeah, so, like, I understand the argument, but I still think overall this is just better. I think it's just way more balanced. We don't have busted Link monsters coming in through Link Frames Pack 3, and we don't have terrible, like, useless. Like, you know when we see a new Yu-Gi-Oh! Core set, and, like, 40 of the cards in the set are just like, who would ever target this card to purchase? Like, never. And it's going to make the set much less desirable for the fan base. Konami's going to sell less, whatever. And we always, like, question that. This set has none of that. None of these new cards have that. I think if you're a fan of any of these archetypes, you're looking at this card and going like, even the Maikashi one. I know it's not amazing, but they can put monsters on the board. And making it is not impossible in that deck. So, like, I don't know. I think overall, it's just the most balanced. And I think it's the way it's supposed to be. I don't think Link Brains Pack was supposed to be about monsters that break the game or useless monsters that nobody cares about. I think all of these in their own right are desired by somebody who's a fan of that archetype or an archetype that can make use of that monster. Looking at, like, the artifact one, like, Trap Tricks is playable in. There are machine decks that can make the Mecha Phantom Beast one. Any, like, generic decks that can use the Union Carrier one. Like, right, there's, like, even if you're not actually a fan of that, you still want that card. You still have a reason to be excited about that card coming out. Listen, I know this isn't even our sets, and I'm getting, like, fairly passionate about talking about like, sets that aren't even ours. We're just going to wait for these to be imported. But, like, even though we don't get them in the exact set, I still want to talk about them. And I think Konami just learned. I think Konami learned, like, okay, got it. Needle Fiber, Electromite, and Isold, too generic and help too many decks generically to really make more cards like that. They didn't do anything that's quite on their level in Link Frames Pack 2, in my opinion, but they still had some cards that were a little weaker. And then I think they were like, okay, I think we should also not have multiple Link monsters that, like, nobody cares about. Why not? Like, I think the set's going to sell if we have stuff that's all pretty good, but nothing that's busted and nothing that's terrible. And I think that's where this really rounds out. It's just the most balanced by far to me, and that's why it's my favorite one. I don't look at a single one of these Link monsters and think, who would ever want this? I look at every one of them, and I think if I'm a fan of that archetype, even if I'm not, just putting myself in their shoes, they probably want it. They're probably excited, because they all really do give a nice boost to all their archetypes individually, and some other archetypes otherwise. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. That's pretty much my thoughts on the Link Frames packs. I assume this would probably be the last one. I mean, the Link Frames era will technically be over after Eternity Code. Maybe Konami goes back one more round for you know, old time's sakes, if Link Monsters are still a thing for Master Rules 5, if we end up there, and does that. But I assume this is, for now at least, the last Link Vrains pack we will be getting. We'll still probably get more Link monsters, but just not all in a big haul like this all at once. So, but overall, these are just my thoughts here, guys. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm really curious to see what you guys think about the Link Vrains stuff. Yeah, I'm just curious. So let me know your thoughts down below, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. Just listen to me rant about Link Frames Pack 3 and why I think it's phenomenal. I love you guys. Peace.